I'm Eddie Conway coming to you from Baltimore. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Rattling the Bars for the Real News. We have been watching for the past several weeks the pandemic as it has spread into the prison systems across America. And we have a concern that this could be very detrimental to the prison population that's housed in a confined space, that's setting on top of each other in some cases. It could also be detrimental to the guard force that's coming in and going back into the community. Joining me today is Ray Noel, Duncan Terr, and Joy James. Okay, Duncan, I would like to start off with an overview. You've put out a list on your website of incidents around the country. Can you kind of like just give us a broad overview of what's going on in prisons across the country?
Yeah, totally. So since the project started, the Perilous Chronicle of Prisoner Unrest, we've been trying to track all instances of collective prisoner actions in the US and Canada since 2010. And we've been chipping away at that. And then when this crisis hit, we were like, we need to go into overdrive and to try to keep up with what we knew was going to be a huge wave of events. And as we predicted, since March 17th, there's been from what I can tell and what we can tell based on our research, one of the largest waves of prisoner organizing and unrest in a long time. I think a historian can make a more longue durée argument, but seemingly bigger than either of the last two national prisoner strikes, which were huge, amazing events. And this is like, from what I can tell, surpassing even those like historic events of the prisoner movement. So we're always counting new events and trying to, we'll hear rumors on Twitter and stuff, and try to at least like confirm them. There's lots of rumors go around, but the current count I have is 48 events in the US and Canada, but only one of those is in Canada. So 47 events in the US since March 17th, which that was the first hunger strike that was like a direct response to the virus spreading. And I can talk through some of the most recent numbers really briefly. It's hit, this wave of prisoner unrest and actions is hit all over the country, but the most frequent states are 5 in Louisiana, 4 in New Jersey, 4 in California, and 4 in Washington. The vast majority of the events that we've seen so far are at immigrant detention centers, so that's 26 that we count. But that's a little bit confusing sometimes because sometimes immigrant detention centers are in county jails and so on. So, but it's also hit state prisons and 1 juvenile detention center. And so what do these events look like? All sorts of stuff. Vast majority are hunger strikes, but there's also been work stoppages and 10 what we call uprisings, which is hard to quantify, but sort of more confrontational events, what people might call riots, often attacked with pepper spray or tear gas by the guards. And there's been also a series of other events like, different sorts of protests. This one that got a lot of attention in this because of the tragic nature of it, of this like collective threat of suicide that was put on Facebook Live. It's like we're gonna collectively commit suicide if this is not dealt with in an adequate way. And it's so hard, as we probably all know, to count, to find out some of the information that to get in contact with some of the participants and see what issues sparked it, what demands they had. If there were no demands, what do they want the media to know about the riot? So that's difficult, but what struck me and the rest of the Perilous crew about this wave of prisoner unrest is that there is this demand that actually was super rare before right now, as far as I can tell, right? I have a limited scope on this, but but the demand for immediate release, which is like this common sense demand that is going to save lives. And one of the most inspiring and amazing things about this moment is I think that this demand that even in the prison strikes, they had like different sets of demands, all really amazing and well thought out. But this one is super rare. For like we're going on hunger strike for our immediate release, or for the release of at-risk prisoners, older prisoners, people that have been in for longer amounts of time, slated for release. So that has showed up in many of these actions all across the country, and if there is a glimmer of hope in any of this, it's this common sense demand for some more degree of freedom, for getting out of these facilities that are literally becoming death sentences for these people. This is a demand coming from prisoners and from all parts of society now, in a way that could hopefully pave the way for some radical change to incarceration.
Okay, and I looked at some of those. Obviously, the threat for mass suicide was psychodrama, but it did get attention, and hunger strikes and so on are getting attention. But what Ray, maybe you can help me with this. What's happening? What's been the general response in the prison systems? As far as you know, the ones that you're looking at, what's been the response from the officials, and what's the attitude of the public? I mean, everybody's on panic mode right now. So can you assess any of that?
Duncan said about this being sort of a new moment, sort of an unprecedented moment of how people are asking for immediate release. I can only speak to the sort of Chicago, Illinois situation, but certainly that is absolutely on the table. It seems like across the board, from both people that are working on detention camps as well as sort of general abolitionists in the city, and putting a lot of pressure on multiple levels of government, including sort of the mayor here, Mayor Lightfoot, Sheriff Dart, Cook County Board in general, and then the governor in terms of asking for clemency, asking for furlough, asking for immediate release. Seems like a very promising moment in which there's sort of this mass scale ask for immediate release, certainly from the inside. I mean, across the board from the inside, but as well as a lot of the public. But then I think it's being somewhat dampened by this concern around what type of crime and who should be released, and the sort of the slowness of that process amongst multiple scales of government at this moment. What we've been seeing, I think, is that unlike the New York case, where a lot of those that have passed inside, there's been a lot of profiling that they were sort of innocent, before proven guilty, but also just sort of thinking about the technicality of their cases and dying as a death punishment for something that like are on sort of like juridical technicalities. What's been happening in Chicago is that I think that there's been a swarming of talking about those that have already died as people that basically deserve to die, or that they, because their cases were so violent, so sex offenses, rape, etc. There's been sort of a sort of backlash right now from, I think, conservatives that saying, what else were we supposed to do? Why would we mass release if these are sort of the worst? I think something that I've been struggling with a little bit is that a lot of the people that I know in county are on violent charges, and a lot of their friends are on treatment units, have already been released because they have amazing efforts, one from community bond, but also have low bond enough cases or on nonviolent charges that they've already been released. What's not sort of, not enough focus is on is the way in which like even the court systems right now are so, they're basically suspending the ability for a speedy trial at this point constitutionally. And this happened at the end of March. But for instance, I have a friend who, hasn't seen a judge since January, has had continuations. Now with this, basically what is needed for their case is a mitigation, like some sort of mitigation interview, because nobody can get in, that interview can't happen, and courts are suspended until at least May, if not longer, which means that even just to have access to a trial right now. So can't be released because of bond, can't be released because of the charge, but also in this delayed court system has no way of getting out. And so sort of paying attention to the ways in which these sort of constitutional rights to speedy trial are being impacted, particularly for those with violent charges, is super critical right now in a lot of ways.
Dr. Joy, I like that. I'm really concerned. I mean, my concern is that, having spent years in the prison system, I know for a fact that there's overwhelming Black and brown bodies in these systems, especially up at the supermax level, the maximum security level, where everybody's jammed in tight. There's 3 inches of steel between each person. Say, for instance, in dormitories, you're sometimes sleeping a foot, 2 feet away from the bunk next to you, just enough space to walk up and down the aisle. This pandemic is going to have a devastating impact on the prison population and on primary Black and brown bodies. How do you see this?
Thanks for you putting it into a great framework. I mean, it reminds me of a cargo ship or the hold, right? Just like being packed in, and also the disposability. So like you're not humans, you're just bodies, you're cargo, you're laborers that we can exploit and then dispose of if, the economy doesn't need you right now. I've been connected to listening to rap a lot, release aging people from prison, Jose Saldana, Laura Whitehorn, and others, right, based in New York City. And also the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression was refounded in November in Chicago. So Frank Chapman is now the director. So between Chicago Alliance and RAP, you're kind of getting a picture of families. We talk about people on the first line. So the families, the friends, the kins of people who are incarcerated are also first line defenders, right? So they're attempting to give support, deal with the trauma of the people inside, and also deal, with the secondary trauma that they're feeling, and also the desperation. So I've heard, Black mothers say to Cuomo, like when we're having these viral or virtual, engagements, that this is not going to be another Attica. And that if Cuomo thinks that, under, passing this new budget, he's going to limit bail reform, he's going to ignore the incarcerated, he's going to have them make sanitizer to be sold, right? But not have soap, regular water or sanitizer for the incarcerated, then she basically calls him out. Then he needs to have a second thought. And also his job doesn't have the security perhaps that he thinks it does. So I think, like, to answer, some of the questions that you're posing to Duncan and to Ray, and they've been, setting the stage too on how we engage with this. I think that first and foremost, we all, everybody says we're all in this together up to a certain degree. And then the disposability, of people gets based on your poverty or your wealth, right? Gets based on your radical ideology, because, I have worked with political prisoners and, have tracked the ways in which they're tortured as, an add-on to the general, torturous environment of captivity, right? And you're obviously tracked by race. So what is it? It's like 38% of the deaths in New York City are probably Latinx, and about 24% or so or plus are Black. So that's 60%, right? It's like whites are not dying at the rates that Black and brown people are dying, nor are Asians, but also people who are in these care industries. Like they're maintaining the city, they're maintaining the hospitals, they're maintaining entire infrastructure that has, accepted that their value isn't worth the dollar that they'd rather put into investment portfolios.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm curious, Duncan or either Ray, do either one of you have a kind of like an overview number of how many cases up to maybe yesterday has been located in the prison systems, detention centers, etc.? Or how many deaths have occurred? Can either one of y'all address that?
As far as like deaths go, I mean, as far as cases in Michigan, even where I live, I mean, it just changes so much. And, also people don't have symptoms. Like 50% of people I heard like don't have, so it's like, it's really hard to say as far as cases, but the two places I've just talked about, Rikers and Cook County Jail. So Rikers was reported as having the rate 8 times higher than the rest of New York City. And then Cook County has the largest cluster of cases in the country, Cook County Jail, sorry. And then as deaths, my recent numbers say 2 people die at the Cook County Jail, 3 across prisons in Georgia, 10 at different federal facilities around the country, and 3 others in New York. By the time I read this, these are quite likely out of date, even if I got these numbers yesterday, because of the nature of incarceration, and you can't. I mean, it's just the rate at which it spreads is unbelievable. So, but that's, I guess, some picture from the recent past.
Yeah, Ray, I'm going to get to you in 1 second. We're having that same problem here in Maryland because the official numbers come out. There's 2 or there's 5 employees impacted, 3 people died, etc. And then when we talk to prisoners inside, we find that there's dozens of prisoners that's already been put in isolation, cases that they're not talking about. The guards are denying that some of their officers have been infected. So it's really shady. But Ray, you're looking at the epicenter apparently. How does it look there?
As we should be suspicious of in all testing right now, it's the testing right now for inside is also more difficult to get accurate numbers. One thing before I sort of say the sort of numbers that we've been hearing in Illinois is that I think it's important to not put the guard numbers with those that are incarcerated. I've been seeing this a lot, the number 493, which is the reason why Cook County got designated as the sort of epicenter of this. It's 306 for those that are currently incarcerated, and the rest are guards. Even though the guard numbers are important, and that's basically sort of demonstrating the way that this is getting in and out right now in these spaces. But currently for Cook County, I didn't look at the numbers this morning, but it's at 306 and there's 3 deaths. I also have been paying close attention to Logan Correctional, which is the women's prison in Illinois. It currently has 4 cases from staff and 2 supposed cases testing positive of those that are incarcerated. This also comes after a 2 to 3 day loss of electricity and water, a power outage. I'm getting sort of mixed responses of what the source of that was. But I think the fear is right now is that does that contribute to more cases in the coming days when people are not able to do laundry, to wash, to anything, and also have had limited phone access and tablet access because of that. So, I mean, those are the numbers we're looking at, and I mean, I guess a lot of people just expect them to increase in the coming days. One thing that I've sort of been paying attention to in Chicago with friends that I know that have been released is that they're often going into these sort of second chance reentry programs as the only sort of way for employment if you have a felony record. And most of these positions at this point are frontline positions. So the friends that I know are working as bus servicers for CTA, and the number of positive cases is kind of unreal at this point, or at least I mean, it feels overwhelming to hear how quickly. And they're going into these programs without any sort of protection. So they unlike their apprentices, so they don't have full-time employment. They don't have So they don't have health insurance. A lot of them are losing their link cards. They're losing their link cards and losing their county care, their health insurance benefits, basically because they're working too many hours as apprentices, but they don't have any benefits. And they're often absolutely at the front line of this. They are cleaning the buses in which there's positive cases on. And they're also at risk for not being able, because they're not full-time employees, they can't apply for unemployment. They can't get sick pay. They have no sick pay. They have no vacation time. And so if we sort of think about, there's the wave of the impact of people coming out as well, and just sort of the scope of the ways in which the prison industrial complex sort of expands into work and these other work programs. And sort of, again, a lot of these friends are mid-50s, 60s with underlying health conditions, being forced to sort of basically work or not have anything. This is where our attention should be as well.
And obviously 25% of the world's population of prisoners is here in America. And like I say, Black and brown bodies make up somewhere around 76% of those. It struck me as a potential concentration camp disaster here in America with a pretty face on it, lipstick or whatever you want to call it. And I'm concerned that all of these people are locked in. We're not really getting a lot of news out of the jails. There's probably all sorts of stuff going on inside these jails in terms of people being sick, people being in isolation in hospitals, in lockdown situations. Does this concern, I mean, it concerns me that this could be a dry run for concentration camps. Does this concern you at all, Joy?
Well, so I have friends, right? The word genocide has come up, and I think you raised it as well. And the academic in me says, this is the 50th anniversary coming up for Recharge Genocide, that William Patterson crafted and Malcolm marched to the UN with. And so, I think like the information that Duncan, that Ray, and that others, yourself, that we've put on the table, it would have to be information that we would want to look at without a filter, without these kind of cheering, like, well, we'll get through this, or we're better than this, or, people talk about it's a war as if a virus is actually the aggressor. I mean, the aggressor is the state. I mean, that's why you have so many caged people, the highest rate in the world. That's why they're treated as bad as you would treat abused animals, right? Because, their humanity doesn't register. And, it's a war that has sophisticated propaganda aspects, I think. Ray or Duncan spoke to that. That's like, we'll let the good ones out maybe, but the bad ones are going to be like a threat. I mean, the state is a threat to you. And that doesn't, minimize the crime that happens, the domestic violence that happens, the sexual assault that happens, real. But the state is a predatory state, and I'm not speaking a hyperbolic sense or like, we don't have to run through the numbers, we don't have to go through like what happened after Katrina in terms of disposability, what happened in Flint, Michigan with the water and Legionnaire's disease, people dying from that. This is a thing in New York, right? I'm at my window, we're, banging on the can with the wooden spoon, and I'm expressing my appreciation for all the healthcare providers, for all the people who are keeping the buses running, the subways. Like, there are hundreds of people who are out, ill. 30 plus people who do mass transit have died, bus drivers, right? But in terms of our emotional intelligence, it goes back to, camps of disposability, concentration camps. It's not just our appreciation that's part of our emotions, right? It's our rage. And this is what I'm looking for as a public discourse, not just with my friends. Our right to be furious and enraged about this moment, which has always been this moment. It's just like incredibly expanded, because it's not even the numbers of death. It's because the economy got screwed up. people die all the time in the States based on race, poverty, they're hunted, they're exploited, right? But because the economy is off kilter, it's having an impact that radiates straight up the ladder. And then what they're going to do is enforce austerity measures, which is what Cuomo did with this new budget, which is just going to create more stress, more distress, more death. So yeah, I side with my friends. It's a genocidal. It doesn't have to be Nazi Germany. You know, the UN Convention, you know, lays it out. It's multivariate. And then the point becomes, would we want to have a confrontation, you know, however that evolves intellectually, politically, electorally, around, you know, disposability and mass death? And one last thing I want to say. So the official numbers are the numbers that make it to the hospital. A lot of people don't make it to the hospital. 200 people die a day in their apartments in New York City. And since you're not testing, you don't know that they're dying from COVID. But disproportionately, right, they're going to be Black and brown people. But somehow, like, we've always been dying, you know, at home. We've always been dying homeless. We've been dying in prison. We've been dying outside of prison. So somehow, if this is a pivotal moment, we would have to have an analysis that would be able to make an impact on the political order.
I would just add, like, I think from what I've seen in the actions that I've helped research for Perilous, prisoners are right there with the tone of this panel. I mean, not to generalize all prisoners, right? But it's like people are talking about it as life or death, right? Which is another, like, they're talking about it. If they're not saying genocide, they're seeing it as a death sentence, as whatever, however they got in there, whether that's for immigration reasons or like they're seeing now as like this as a life or death situation, and they're fighting for their life. They're fighting for their survival, and they're fighting for their freedom. So yeah, that's part of the story too of this resistance to the genocide.
Well, since we got a couple minutes, though, if it's all right with you all, I do want to kind of get the idea in also from the three of y'all of who can people reach out to, or what can they or should they be doing? So, Ray, you want to start off?
I just like echo what Duncan and sort of everybody else has said, is that you know, one of the most important things right now is communication inside. You know, daily communication. We shouldn't expect that the official releases for any of this information is going to be accurate, and so having connections and strengthening those connections right now is crucial and critical. Also, just sort of following the line of what already so many beautiful sort of organizations have showed up in the last month or so, demanding call-ins, demanding to flood the sort of governor's lines and all these lines to demand immediate release, and putting in a lot of work of getting statements and other materials out as quickly as possible. You know, I guess my sort of one thing around this is of course that I feel very skeptical of asking the state when the state has failed so many of us, particularly has like failed Black and brown communities over and over and over again, to ask them to do immediate release just seems a difficult ask, or one that doesn't seem clear to me will be done with any sort of pressure. And the other option I think is caravans. And, you know, we're in this unique moment where we can't organize the way that we used to be able to organize. And so I think caravans have been really sort of brilliant ways to respond to gathering and being sort of in public, whatever that means at these moments. I think we should also be careful about these too. They're often about visibility and spectacle. For instance, in Chicago, when the caravan happened, Tony Preckwinkle, who's part of the board, thanked the organizers for doing this caravan. You know, I don't know how much we could say we're on the right side if we have, you know, the sort of politicians who are basically blocking this, thanking us for that sort of work. It means that we're not pushing hard enough. You know, sort of, I would sort of reaffirm that the sort of goals of something like a caravan can be multiple, and it can be about shared visibility, shared joy, but also getting noise across. People inside can hear, particularly at county. It's not true at other rural prisons that have long gates between the streets, but certainly people inside can. And coordinating with people inside to know that you're there, having a phone number where you can show that phone number, people can call and talk about conditions during the caravan. Those are really important moves and have been done through lots of actions like DeKalb. Atlanta people did this. But the other thing is thinking about sort of our cars at this point, and those who have access to cars, we can act as barricades to these infrastructures. Thinking about people being able to come in and out, and thinking about response times to National Guard. If we really think that the actual fight of this all is going to be happening in a moment of unrest, right? The fight, that's actually where the fight is. We can do all the stuff in the outside to support, but if we have sort of a meaningful understanding that this fight is actually happening in that moment, thinking about ways that caravans can mobilize at that moment too, I think is crucial and important to thinking about being a part of that fight that's beyond visibility only, which I'm not diminishing, but also just saying we can take it up a notch, I think, in that way.
Okay, I'm gonna bounce back to you, Duncan, for what people can be doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a good question and always a hard question to answer. I mean, I think people are positioned to do different things. And, whether that is, I mean, there are some like paroles are happening in Michigan, at least, people are getting pushed out the door a little bit, and like supporting people that get out is a huge thing. That we're looking at here, but also, I mean, I love what Ray was saying, and also, like, people that aren't paroled are getting out themselves. There's been a couple escapes because of this, because the choice is escape or die, and for these people, and that's how they're framing it. And but I think the one in this county jail in Washington, after 4 or 5 days, people got caught up again. But if you're watching this and that happens around you, I mean, these people are like fleeing for their lives, and I think this is a wild time where new things are possible, and I think taking whatever action you're positioned to do to protect people and especially the vulnerable and the prisoners.
Okay, Joy. Same question, but I was just thinking as this was going on about storming the Bastille, and I know we can't storm the Bastille here now under these circumstances, but what do you think people can be doing, should be doing, and what's your final thoughts?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I've been asking that to myself and, with my folks. But so one thing that comes out is the distribution lines, right? That, we can get goods to the extent that we can buy supplies, or for people in prison, put more money into their commissary, right? But distribution, like, it's all about distribution, supplies, what you can get in, or what you can give in terms of stamps so that people can write to you, via email or JPay, whatever, but also outside. So I think it's almost like parallel worlds, right? There needs to be distribution centers, like you can't rely on the state to be able to deliver. The other thing, I think, I know we're talking about the US, but we also need to go global. Just because of what's going on in Brazil with Bolsonaro, what's going on in Haiti, we could go around the globe, right? That it may seem like it's a stretch, but it's not. Like, if we can see what other countries are doing, and we can compare with our own, and we can work with people that we know, including political prisoners, right? Who I think have knowledge about how deep state repression goes. So political prisoners in the US, political prisoners in Bolsonaro's Brazil, indigenous, Black people, radicals, of all ethnicities, of all backgrounds. I think that's important. And I guess one of the last things I would say, or two last things, like for somebody who's like an academic like me, we have to change our consumption patterns, right? Like, we need to consume less, put aside funds more, and then distribute them to these organizations that can distribute them, in different ways for advocacy or, for the people who are inside. And then it is a fight. We have ongoing a political fight with government on all branches and all levels. So if you can lobby your governor to whatever, Bureau of Prisons, et cetera, but, compassionate release, clemency, the people are calling all different levels of the government and just flooding their phone lines, their writing. It's, that's one kind of advocacy. I mean, I don't want to belabor this point. Everything that we're doing is going to be important. Everything we do is going to be insufficient. We will still have people we care about, people we never know who will die, right? But our trauma from that can be, I'm thinking of Greta Thunberg, who says Asperger's is a superpower. Our trauma could be our superpower, that we won't compromise with the same old template that we keep being presented in front of us as some sort of panacea, for all these ills that are largely created, by predatory behavior from government and from corporations and others. So there'll be other pandemics, but maybe in struggling with this one, we'll be better prepared to increase our chances and the chances of the people who should not be captive anywhere.
All right. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Rattling the Bars for the Real News.